Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Happy Friday, everybody. Of course, it is not a happy Friday for the friends, family and supporters of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who I'm sure many of you are aware now was assassinated today, being shot while giving a speech in Nara, just east of Osaka. This afternoon, Beijing time, before the announcement that Abe had died, People's Republic of China Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian told a news conference, quote, "We are following the developments and we hope former Prime Minister Abe will be out of danger and recover soon." End quote. This was a relatively lukewarm comment compared with other world leaders, even compared to the Russian Foreign Ministry, whose spokeswoman expressed just a few hours ago that Moscow was, quote, "stunned by the news of the tragedy that occurred today in Japan and cannot be justified." End quote. Then a few hours after this, Russian leader Vladimir Putin, who was under Japanese sanctions, sent a personal letter to Abe's family, calling Abe a great statesman and expressing his deepest condolences. After being asked by foreign reporters if he had any comments on Chinese social media reactions, which were notably, perhaps even largely gleeful and celebratory over the Abe news, Zhao Lijian expressed, quote, "I've just fully expressed the Chinese government's position. This unexpected incident should not be associated with Sino-Japanese relations." End quote. Some prominent nationalists in China did warn social media users to showcase some respect, however, to be patriotic and speak up in a rational way, in the words of one right-wing scholar based in Beijing, perhaps anticipating the international reputational and diplomatic damage which could be caused by unbridled and gratuitous gloating on Chinese social media. This is very much a developing story, and we will have more, if relevant, tomorrow. Next up, the Chinese economy, and we're looking specifically at more stimulus. A surge in debt-fueled infrastructure investment is yet another sign of a Beijing racing to rescue its zero-COVID hit economy and reach politically acceptable growth levels in what is a tremendously sensitive year with the upcoming Party Congress. This week, yet more stimulus has been announced. Yesterday, Bloomberg's Hong Kong team reported that the Ministry of Finance is considering allowing local governments to sell 1.5 trillion yuan, approximately $220 billion of special bonds in the second half of this year. Quote, "An unprecedented acceleration of infrastructure funding aimed at shoring up the country's beleaguered economy." End quote. The bond sales would eat into next year's quota, which would mark the first time the issuance has been fast-tracked in this way. Again, quote, "underscoring growing concerns in Beijing over the dire state of the world's second-largest economy." End quote. All this spending, of course, means more debt for local economies. According to a report this week by Great Wall Securities, the first 6 months of this year, local governments sold 5.26 trillion RMB of bonds, equal to just under 9% of the period's GDP, with nearly 60% of that occurring in the last 2 months. Indeed, in June, local governments sold a record 1.94 trillion RMB, almost $290 billion worth of bonds, representing a year-on-year increase of 143%. Topping the previous monthly record of 1.3 trillion RMB in May of 2020. And in that year, China saw its largest increase in debt to GDP on record. Again, according to Great Wall Securities, special purpose bonds, which are used to fund infrastructure spending, made up 71% of the total bond issuance. Quote, "It has been clear for some time that local governments need more money. The news today suggests that the central government is still unwilling to expand its own balance sheet, and instead let local governments bring their borrowing quota from 2023, which means a fiscal cliff next year." End quote. Now, we're going to come back to debt, this issue of debt, when we discuss the housing sector later in the video. But while we're on the general economy here, one more quick thing. Yesterday, Thursday, the Ministry of Commerce and Finance Ministry announced a set of new measures to spur consumer demand for cars, labeling the automobile sector a, quote, strategic and pillar industry, end quote, and saying that it will consider extending a tax break for electric vehicles. The problem, as several economists have pointed out today, is that while these measures will increase the sale of affected cars, without an increase in household income generally, all they do is transfer consumption from one set of goods to another set of goods, and thus won't meaningfully offset downward pressure on the economy due to weak demand. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the episode, don't forget the like button, and if you want to support China Update, it's just me making these, and help me keep this channel sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This is a tremendous help as well. As always, thank you so much everybody, for the ongoing support. For the quote of the week, I wanted to look at part of a long piece published yesterday across the main state media platforms by Chu Qingshan, head of the Institute of Party History and Literature of the Party Central Committee. The piece generally examines and argues that Xi Jinping is needed for China to navigate the complex geopolitical environment and achieve the great rejuvenation of the Chinese race, also translated as the Chinese nation. The quote, which we will cover here, touches on US-China relations specifically and reminds us once again that a dominant elite view in Beijing is that 1. China is in a deep structural struggle with the United States and the wider West, and 2. This will be a long and hard struggle, but one from which China will emerge victorious from, again according to this elite worldview in Beijing. Here is the quote. "The great rejuvenation of the Chinese race is destined to be an extraordinary journey that will change history and create the future. However, Western countries, led by the United States, do not want to see the emergence of a strong China, much less a strong socialist China. The United States regards China as a strategic competitor and has launched comprehensive containment and extreme pressure on China in all aspects, including with science and technology, the economy, politics, military and diplomacy, in an attempt to obstruct the historical process of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese race. And China is facing a complicated international environment. The struggle between our two social systems and two ideologies will also be long-term, complex, arduous, and severe. The strategic contest between China and the United States is bound to last for a long period of time, for which we must be fully prepared, ideologically and in our tasks." End quote. And last up, the housing crisis. Highly respected China debt analyst Charlene has been in the news this week for her statements on the Chinese housing crisis, warning that pain is only just beginning for credit extended to the Chinese property sector. The Wall Street Journal once called Chu the rock star of Chinese debt analysis. As an analyst at Fitch Ratings, her work was widely followed, particularly when she began warning about risks in China's banking sector, even though the economy was booming at the time. Now a senior analyst at Autonomous Research, her research reports are must-reads for those tracking China's economic development and its financial sector, according to many in the industry. Chu expressed in a recent interview that, quote, "We have 30 companies who have defaulted with total liabilities of around $1 trillion. End quote. In the same interview, Chu continued by expressing that where things could start to get a lot more ugly is if lenders, banks mainly, start revaluing developers' collateral lower. Quote, "We're just so early in this process of these defaults happening, and restructurings usually take quite a long time. We haven't really gotten to the point of saying, okay, well, what's really going to happen with these buildings?" End quote. Chu then explained that the larger risk is if households start defaulting on home loans. With household debt at historical highs and unemployment rising, this prospect is no longer as unimaginable as it was just a few years ago. Quote, "We've got a property sector that is almost dead and barely growing, and used to employ huge numbers of people in a lot of downstream industries for furniture and home goods and electronics and appliances. All of that is getting impacted by this property slowdown, and that's why I think we're still early in the game here." End quote. She continued, "We need to keep in mind the declining demographics in China. The working age population, which is really the property-consuming group, peaked in 2015 at 801 million people and is already down 20 million. End quote. Like several other high-profile China financial experts, including Peking University's Michael Pettis, Chu believes that a financial crisis is unlikely. Rather, debt will weigh down the Chinese economy over time. Quote, "We are entering a new era here, where we are going to be looking at low to mid single-digit growth in China, at best." End quote.